We're continuing in Halacha Hey. We're going to talk about a few different topics today that are, one of them, the beginning of them is connected to what we've talked about the past 2 times. And that is, we're talking about foods that, or a number of foods, that there's a shaila where the goyim are allowed to eat those foods. Okay? Usually we talk about kashrus for Jews. Here it's shaila for them, and indirectly for whether we're allowed to sell to them, which is very interrelated. Okay. The first part we're going to talk about is milk and eggs. We saw that the Torah gives us a kula that we're allowed to eat milk and eggs, even though they seemingly are yotze from an Eivir and a Chai. So a number of Achronim talk about, well, Eivir and a Chai is also to goyim. That's one of that's what they're not allowed to eat is Eivir and a Chai. So if these things are potentially Eivir and a Chai, and we have a kula that says we're allowed to eat them, does that automatically mean that the goyim are allowed to eat that also? If we're allowed to eat it, but for them it's Eivir and a Chai, they're not allowed to eat Eivir and a Chai. So is it also mutter for them to eat it as well? Okay, so let's do milk first. Milk is a simpler one, and that is first is like this. The crazy place he says he disagrees with the whole question because she gave sisra. Very good. Okay, I have a different pasuk. Very good. Okay, it's a good point.
I mean, doesn't Gemara say that it be?
So Avraham Avinu we're going to get to that. We're coming to it.
It's rather a different, right. Lishma,
you're right. Okay, Tzakonas the Parshas. Okay.
So doesn't Gemara say that it be that it's mutter?
I'm coming to that also. I'm coming to also. Good.
That's
Everybody's very smart. Okay, everybody's very smart of you. I'm coming to all this. Mitzvah, not the Sisra, but the other ones. Okay, so the first is crazy place. He says that the question is a mistake. The question, he disagrees with the whole question, and that's because he says Eivir and a Chai is asur, and all things are asur. Remember, we had a special pasuk we talked about the very first time. The pasuk that says Hatmeim, which teaches us that seer of Isser is asur also, and from there we learn out that Yotze, Yotze is an example of kind of a seer. We learn out from that it's asur. He says that pasuk Hatmeim to asur the Yotze. That pasuk itself is only for Yidden. That pasuk, we have an Isser to do that. Goyim don't have that Isser. The whole, he disagrees with the whole question. He says the Isser of Yotze doesn't apply to Goyim B'chlal. They don't have such an Isser of Yotze that we have to think about, is this an example, should they be mutter also for Antidus? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. He brings a raya. The Gemara says, he doesn't do that. Chasam Sofer, when he brings this answer, brings a raya. The Gemara tries to bring rayas that milk is mutter for Yidden. The Gemara says to some of those rayas, he says, maybe it's not mutter to Yidden. Maybe when the Torah is telling us that you'll have milk, it'll be l'schoira, meaning you'll sell it for goyim, which is saying it's mutter for goyim. No, not for us. But to the goyim, it would have been mutter. That the whole pasuk is saying that it's mutter. So now there are other answers to that, but he says that what that means is because the whole pasuk is the pasuk of Hatmeim to Aser Yotzi doesn't apply to goyim b'chal. Excuse me, and therefore the whole question doesn't start. Okay, now look, to contrast that, I have to just tell you. And Dr. Yeshuva brings in Simon South Base, he brings there's a shaila in Achronim whether goyim have to be makbid on belias for Eivir and a Chai, okay? Whether they have such a chashash, and that question, maybe this is what it's telling you, but that question assumes that whatever is when you have an isser, you have the extension of that isser also. Okay, now we have the isser of Eivir and a Chai, his isser of belias Eivir and a Chai, belias of Eivir and a Chai, not the Eivir and a Chai itself. We need psukim to learn that a belias is asur also, but that's coming with an assumption that if Eivir and a Chai is asur, then all the extensions of that isser are also, which means it's belias and yotze, those should be extensions of it, which Kenzain is telling in this shayla about what this place he said. The place says no, there's no such thing. They only asur in the thing itself. the yotze doesn't asur. Okay, that's one answer. Okay, Pri Megadim and a different Chasam Sofer, the second Chasam Sofer we'll talk about more this time, say that it's mutter because of the pasuk that David mentioned, that Aruch Avinu gave the Malachim Chalav, Veikachem Chalav, to people who he thought were goyim, and therefore if he could give it to them, it's alright that it's mutter. That's not telling us why it's mutter. They're just telling us that it is mutter, which is okay. The psukim that tell us that Chalav is mutter for Yidden also don't tell us why it's mutter. It's also, we just have a pasuk that you're allowed to eat it, so we figure out that the Baruch obviously wanted us to have it in mind, and we somehow Avraham Avinu knew that he was allowed to give it to them.
That I had to be chayed by Eivir and a Chai, the Gemara has to have another limud afterwards to say. I just my head's ringing a little bit.
Okay, so you can keep on reading.
You know, where it's got to just so something that said Kon Mantor has be chayed by C9.
Yes.
So, by God's not okay that?
I have no idea. Okay. Anyhow, okay. And we're going to see more as we into the second part of what we're talking about today. The second part, we're going to talk about a third possible answer, which is the Gemara has a rule. We're going to talk about it later on, which is Mi'ika Midi. Okay, the Gemara has a rule. It says Mi'ika Midi Dil Yisrael Shari or Kacham Aser. Okay, the Gemara has such a rule that if something is mutter for a yid, Goyim have less mitzvahs than Yidden do. So if something is mutter for Yidden, if something is mutter for Yid, it's for sure mutter for a Goy. Okay, so the Gemara has such a rule. If that rule is true, that's what we're going to talk about later, but if that rule is true, then if I'm allowed to eat milk, then he's of course allowed to eat milk. Okay, we don't have to have special limudim, because if there's such a rule, then just like that rule applies, if I'm allowed to eat milk, then he's for sure allowed to eat milk. Okay, so we're going to talk about that as we go on. Okay, that milk was easier of them. Eggs is more complicated. Okay, but before we start, some Sefer points out that in Siman Pei Vav, the end of Siman Pei Vav is about eggs. Okay, that's what the whole siman is about. And at the end of the siman it says, if you have a beitzas nevela utrefa, a beya from an animal that was in nevela, there's something so wrong with it that it's already nevela while it's alive, or it's a trefa, that's easier to pull off, a nevela or a trefa, then the din is, it talks about when you're allowed to sell to a guy. And the other concern is, if you sell to the guy, he might resell to a yid. You know it's a beitzas nevela. When you sell to the guy, to him it looks like a regular egg. I mean, it's a yid might buy from him, not knowing that he's getting an egg that's usher. So it talks about when you are or not allowed to sell to the guy. When should you be concerned that the yid who bought, somebody might buy from him, and I'll think that it's kosher. Okay, that's what the halacha yid is about, and that's it there. Okay, but the underlying implication is that you're allowed to sell eggs. Okay, that he can sell the egg by himself, if not for the fact that he would sell it onto a yid, so of course you're allowed to sell it to him. So he starts off with a hanacha that we see that it's mutter. The question is really why. Okay, why should it be mutter? Why isn't it Yotzim Ev Menachai? That's what he said. But he has, it is a thing over here that it's mutter to sell them. Okay. Okay. So I had told you 3 reasons why you might be allowed to sell. Why a guy might allowed to eat milk. 2 of those apply to eggs, the same as the other ones do. And one is, if you say like the crazy placey, that all yotzei is mutter for goyim, they don't have the issue of a tzmeim, so then they don't have the issue of yotzei for eggs either. If you say the reason is because mi'ika midi, that if it's mutter for a yid, it's mutter for a goy, then of course that applies to eggs just like also. The middle reason, which is our connection to what we're talking about, the middle reason is that we had a pasuk that Avraham Avinu gave milk to who he thought were goyim, and therefore if he gave milk to them, it shows you that milk is mutter. So I thought, I'm not convinced this is right, I thought that if you say like the shach, the machlokes we've been talking about, the shach and the rosh, the shach says that when the Torah was matir milk, it really meant to say is that every yotzei from a kosher animal is really kosher. That's what the pasuk really meant to say. Well, if that's how you understand it, that when the Torah says that a goy was magala, that to a goy is allowed to have milk, it's telling us that same rule applies to them also. That yotzei from a kosher animal is mutter for them also. Okay, so if that's true, then eggs are the same. Possibly. I'm not 100% convinced that's right, but possibly. According to the Rosh, no deal at all. According to the Rosh, the fact that the pasuk would have been matir chol is chol doesn't teach us about eggs. So according to the Rosh, either we'll have to say one of the 2 reasons we said before, or I have 2 more reasons coming. Yes.
If you consider this for a mi'ika midi, then it should only come out that a guy is only mutter to have kosher eggs. You couldn't eat an ostrich eggs because you don't have this word mi'ika midi. Or camel's milk. Okay,
that's a good point. That's true. If it's only mutter because of mi'ika midi,
right,
then he wouldn't be allowed to eat milk or eggs from non-kosher animals. Yes. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, that is a good point. Okay. So the other reasons why eggs might be mutter, besides for the 2 milk reasons why it might be mutter, are, the Rambam says, in the end of Hilchos Melachim, he says, he's talking about the Isser Ephraim and Achai, and he says, Aval ha'oif, yirali she'en benoach nerag al Ephraim and Achai minenu. The Rambam says, there's a lot of ways, there's the question of how to read the Rambam. The simple reading of the Rambam is, that the Rambam is saying is, there's no Isser Ephraim and Achai for a goy on a bird. Okay? Any birds don't have the Isser Ephraim and Achai for goy. If that's what the Rambam means, which is how the Rambam understood what the Rambam means, he doesn't agree with him, but that's how he understood it, and that's how the Pesach Shul brings other there are Achronim who don't like that. If that's what the Rambam meant, then we again have no shiloh, because if there's no Isser Ephraim and Achai on birds for a guy, then eggs come from birds. Well, then we don't have a shiloh that eggs can't be a Yeshach from an Isser, but there is no Ephraim and Achai b'chlal from birds for a guy. Okay? That's how, if you read the Rambam, the simple reading of the Rambam is that that's what he means. Rabbi Kiveger is talking about this. He talks a lot about whether there's Evim and Achai for bird, for Goyim. So first of all, he brings that the Ravid says, it's a mistake when it says the Rambam. When the Rambam says, Aval Ha'oif, it really should say Aval HaSheretz. The Ravid says that it's just a typo in the Rambam. Okay, and it really should say Aval HaSheretz. Because he says it can't be that Aval... The Ravid says that it should say Aval HaSheretz. It shouldn't say Aval Ha'oif, because Oif can't be. There arises from Gemara that it's not true, so he says it can't be. Or...
Are eggs considered Eber?
What?
Are they considered Eber?
They're Yotze from an Evim and Achai. They're not Evim and Achai by themselves, but they're Yotze from an Evim and Achai. That's what we're talking about. Okay. And the Kesef Mishnah says that the Rambam says, if you were paying attention, the Rambam said, but the Kesef Mishnah said, what the Rambam means is it's not, he doesn't get killed for it, but he does, it is also for him. Okay, which again, that doesn't help us. Which other they ask him that? They ask him that, this is what Krieger talks about, I forgot who he brings it from, who talk about that says it's not Shaykh, because for a Goy, everything that he's ushered to do, he gets mis for. It's a long Krieg. I did not get through the whole thing. It's in the Shulchan Aruch. It goes on for pages and pages on the Siman Chav Zayin in the Shulchan Aruch. And Krieg thinks that that's correct. That it is also for Bernach, it is also completely, or it's also, if he really gets killed. But Marashach, he thinks that it's also, that there is an Israel Evim Nachai for birds, for Goyim, and the Pri Megadim, and the Chassidus agree with that. Basically agree with that. Okay? But that's a possible heter. If you think that there's no Evim and Achai B'chlal for Goyim on birds, then we're off the hook. Then eggs can't be more awesome than the bird that they came from. Okay. Lastly is, the Chassidus himself says, that, let's say the eggs are really usher to Goyim. Let's accept it. The eggs are usher to Goyim. He says, but the raya that he brought from Simon Pei Vav doesn't say that Goyim are allowed to eat eggs. All it says is that you're allowed to sell eggs to Goyim. He says, so Kenzai, the egg is still usher to the Goy, and it's just a shayla that there's no Lifnei Iver over here. And the din is just saying that you're allowed to sell it. He's not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to sell it to him. Why would that be? So he says, there's a Mishnah in Shvius that says that basically, the Isser Lifnei Iver is only when it's reasonably assumed that the person you're giving the thing to is going to use it for Isser. If there's a chance that he might use it for Heter, over there we're talking about selling him equipment that he could use on Shemitah, like for cutting down things, and he could use it to cut from Isser or from Heter. He could use it to harvest his own field in a way that's also. He could use it to just stomp cut things off the ground that he's allowed to take. So the Mishnah says over there, the Mishnah has many examples over there, it's in the 5th parak. The Mishnah says over there that there's no Lifnei Iver. So the Chasam Sofer says, well, for his case, he says, well, if I sell him a whole egg, maybe he wants to hatch it. Okay, maybe he's going to take the egg and he's going to have a chicken sit on it, hatch it into a new egg. That would be okay. He says if I sell him a liquid egg, he says maybe he's going to use it for making glue. I don't know. I guess they make glue with eggs. He says maybe they make glue out of it. Okay, so he has studied them. He says different ways. It's possible to use it for something else. In which case there would be. So when the din over here said you could sell it to him, doesn't mean because the guy's allowed to eat. No, he's not allowed to eat it. But I can sell it to him because there's no flavor because of these reasons why. Because there are ways he could use it. I don't have to be choishish he's going to use it this. Okay, now the reasons that he gave are not saying he gave us. I mean, when we sell eggs to a guy, he can't hatch them. They're not going to hatch. I mean, he can sit on it all day long. I mean, Horton can sit on it forever, and it's not going to hatch. What? If you want to go, it's not going to hatch. If you sell liquid eggs, nobody buys liquid eggs that they're going to turn into glue. I mean, they buy liquid eggs to make.
This is only a head to the sell the eggs to the guy. It's not a head to the guy to eat the egg. Right.
According to this, some certain saying really the guy is not allowed to eat it.
Right.
But the only thing why it says you're allowed to sell it, then because selling is not what's neighbor, but he's not allowed to eat it.
Right.
Okay? But I'm saying is that the actual reasons he is for being allowed to sell them wouldn't apply anymore. Our egg, he's not going to hatch the egg. I mean, I'm telling you, you can sit on it all day. It's not going to hatch. Or the liquid egg, no one's making glue out of it. You buy liquid eggs, you're making scrambled eggs out of it. You're making challah out of it. Okay, so, but the hector is very important. That's for the next part of what we're talking about. Okay, that's some surface. Okay,
so according to the Chasam Sofer, what is the halacha with? I mean, he doesn't know it's not halacha. Oh, he said
he's saying it's not halacha.
According to him, an Akum cannot eat eggs.
He leans in that direction. Yeah, he says he brings a rye from Vayikach Chama B'Cholo that a guy allowed to eat milk. He's not convinced he's allowed to eat eggs. Okay.
Really? Halacha l'maisa not convinced about.
Yeah. Wow. Right. Well, I mean, if they come to him,
it's a scrambled eggs, you know.
Sounds
right. We're coming to it in a second. Yes, correct.
What about? The guy walks into one of our restaurants and wants to have eggs.
Right. So the tshuva of the Chasam Sofer is divided into 2 parts. We're talking about. This was in the second half of tshuva. I hope I'm getting this right. hope I'm getting this right. The first part of the truth is a shiloh about what we'll talk about in a second. I hope I'm not mixing it up. The second part says, it has like a heading, it says, I'm going to write here something that I wrote B'imei Churfi. Okay, something I wrote young, and that's the part about why eggs are also for life. Okay, B'imei Churfi, this whole thing, why he thinks that it's also. Okay, now we're going to the first part of the system. Okay, anyhow, but yeah, if I remember, it comes out that basically that they should be also. Okay, so, now, the second part we're going to talk about is something else. Same shiloh, but on a different thing, and that is something called casings. Okay, which is like this. When you shecht an animal, okay, there's two casings.
C-A-S-I-A-T.
Okay, which I like this. When you shecht an animal, the shecht cuts two things. Okay, first thing he cuts is the kana, trachea, the windpipe. Okay, that's the beginning. That's part of the respiratory system of the animal, and then he cuts the veshet. That's the esophagus, the food pipe. That part of the digestive part of the animal. Okay, so he cuts both of those parts of the animal, and what happens is, after he cuts them, the animal doesn't die instantly. Okay, the animal's mefarches for a couple of seconds, and then it dies. Okay, so the Gemara says that Yidden have a special heter in the Torah that they're allowed to eat meat. They're allowed to eat. That shechita is matter the food. So even though you've just damaged this animal, I mean, if you cut an animal's kana or veshet, you wouldn't be allowed to eat that meat. Okay? Even though you just did that before it died, right now I cut the kana and veshet, and in 10 seconds from now it dies. So 10 seconds before it died, the animal had damage done to it that would make it usher to eat it. Okay? You wouldn't be allowed to eat it for whatever, a bunch of reasons. You wouldn't be allowed to eat it. When the Torah says that shechita allows you to eat the animal, the Torah is telling you, don't worry about the fact that for those 10 seconds, the animal would damage in a way that you wouldn't be allowed to eat. Okay, that's the Gemara says that's understood in the heter of shechita. But Goyim don't have a heter of shechita. Goyim don't have a mitzvah or a heter of shechita. So for a guy, he has to think about the animal's not mutter for the guy until it's dead. It doesn't become dead until it stops being mefarches. So for those 10 seconds before it actually died, then you have to think about what damage happened to the animal in between, which is somebody just slit his throat in between before it died. Okay, so you have to think about that. So the Gemara says, Rav Yaakov says, Rish Lakish say that you're not allowed to feed b'nei mi'ayim to a guy. You're not allowed to feed ein mezamnin. I don't know if it says akum there. B'nei mi'ayim. You can't feed them b'nei mi'ayim. Why? Because b'nei mi'ayim are the intestines. Okay, they're part of the intestines. If you take kishka and you serve it to him, well, when you cut the veshet, you just separated the digestive system from the body. It's like you cut a foot off. The digestive system was just unattached from the rest of the body. So now the kishka is Aver Menachai. It's hanging there it's in the middle of the body, but it's not attached anymore. It's Aver Menachai. And therefore, that piece is Aver Menachai because it got cut off before the animal died. The animal didn't die until 10 seconds later. So for now, the digestive system was cut off before the animal died. So therefore, Rav Yaakov says you can't serve b'nei mi'ayim to a guy. You can't have him over, when you invite him over for supper, you give him a piece of chicken, but you can't give him kishka.
Why are lungs then different than the others?
You can't give him lungs either, but I don't know if anybody ate lungs.
Because of the kana.
I don't know if anybody ate lungs, but...
Heart, lungs, they all eat that.
No, heart's okay. Heart's
Why?
okay.
That's not part of the...
No.
Look, he cut the kana and he cut the veshet. So
right.
The kana is the breathing.
The respiratory.
So the respiratory is part of the heart and all that.
No, not the heart, the lungs. That was the lungs. So you couldn't serve him lungs either. I don't know if anybody eats lungs. But eating kishka, that's what people eat. So the Gemara says you can't feed him kishka. If he comes to your house, you're feeding him kishka, you're feeding him Eivim Menachai. You're allowed to eat Eivim Menachai, but he's not allowed to eat Eivim Menachai. Okay, that's what the Gemara, that's what Rav Yaakov says. Comes on the couple, and he says, wait a second, but me kamidi. If a yid's allowed to eat it, because for the yid, the Torah was not the shechita. So he says, mi kamidi, and you're allowed to serve it to him. Okay, so it's a machlokes in the Gemara, whether there's such a rule of mi kamidi. Okay, is there really such a rule? But well, the Gemara, two things. The Gemara has a machlokes, first of all, whether there's such a rule or not. Okay, the Gemara, that's a machlokes if there's such a rule. Okay, there's an underlying machlokes, I'll come to in a second about another point, but that's a machlokes. Okay, so the Rambam, the next halakha we saw before him, says, it's also in Hilchos Malachim, says, the din is like a Rav Yaakov, that there's no rule of mikamidi. Okay? There's no such thing as mikamidi, and it could be that a yid is wanted to eat something, and a guy is also to eat that exact same food. Okay? That's what the Rambam says. The Kesef Mishnah brings that the Rashba brings this Rambam, and is very surprised by it. The Rashba brings rayas that it's not true. And the Rashba is, I think, in a tshuva. I don't remember. The Taz and Simcha Zayin brings the Torah also says like that also. And the Achronim give eitzes on how to say if the Rambam really didn't mean it. Okay, it's not so clear if the Rambam really meant it. Okay, the Shach and Chav Zayin brings, maybe the Rambam was only machmir by the case when it's a goy's animal. Maybe it's a special case only machmir by a goy's animal. The Tzlach in Kulim says, he says, it's very interesting. He says, if you look, what? Because a goy's animal doesn't ever have a heter shchita, and the Yid's animal has a heter shchita.
Nowadays, the guy won't hold the cattle. We buy it after it's shifted.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. I'm just telling you I'm not trying to tell you the answer. I'm trying to tell you, people want to say even the Rambam doesn't mean it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, the Tzlach says, he says, how come the Rambam doesn't bring the case? The Rambam says the din, that there's something that could be mutter for a Yid and also for a goy. But how come he doesn't say, ein mizamnin, al b'nei yayin? How come he doesn't bring the Gemara? How come he brings the rule, but not the case? The Gemara had a case. You're not allowed to feed him kishka. Why didn't you say that? So he says, maybe it's possible to read, it's a shayla in that Gemara, whether the b'nei yayin really are Evim Menachai. Okay, I told you the way the Gemara seems to say, which is that when you cut the veshed, the b'nei yayin become Evim Menachai. It's not so partial. There are all kinds of reasons why the digestive system might still be considered attached enough to not be Evim Menachai. It's not partial that the animal, when you cut the veshed, that the digestive system becomes Evim Menachai automatically. So he says, the Rambam paskins that there's no meat committee. What could be mutter for a Yid could be asa for a guy, but B'nai Yayin are an example of that. Okay, they're not a good example because of other reasons in the Gemara that B'nai Yayin don't qualify as Evim Menachai. So that whole assumption is a mistake. So the rule is taka the rule. There's no meat committee. I'm sorry, there is no such rule of meat committee. But Ken Zayin that there's no that B'nai Yayin are not Evim Menachai. So the long and short of it is, some people say that feeding B'nai Yayin to a guy is an Isser Evim Menachai. It's Isser Evim Menachai to him to do it. The Ram seems to say that it's not. The Kesef Mishnah and always Rishonim, Rajba, and other Achronim who say not like that. But it seems to be a machlokes whether there's Mika Midi and whether you're allowed to feed him B'nai Yayin. Now, all that I told you, that's only true if you shechted the animal. That's all fine and good if you shechted the animal, that you can say Mika Midi. But the Shach says, what happens if the animal was in the Bela? You didn't shech the animal. The animal was just a plain old Bela. So then there's no Mika Midi. Mika Midi means if there was a hectare of shchita for the Yid, then the guy is allowed to eat it also. That's only true if there was a hectare of shchita. So for example, if the animal was a treifa, you'd be allowed to give it to him because it was a hectare of shchita. There's a side that's called treifa, which is not negate the guy. So you say Mika Midi according to those who make it. But if the animal was in a vela, so there was no shchita, so for the Yid it's not mutter. So then if there's no Mika Midi for the Yid, the guy is not allowed to eat it.
If the throat was slit.
If you did if you tried to slaughter the animal and you were unsuccessful, right? If you shot it in its head or just died, that would be fine. But if you tried to cut his throat and you were unsuccessful doing the shchita, or like a guy did the shchita, then it would be everybody would agree that it would be usher.
Not another reason.
Right. If you hold that it's not Evim Menachai B'chav, that's correct. No maskim, correct. But the shach is going not like that. The shach saying it is the Gemara. The simple reading of the Gemara is that it is Evim Menachai. So then it would be usher to do it. Now.
It's an Evim Menachai while it's walking too, right?
Why?
When it's alive, it's called Evim Menachai too.
If you cut the piece off, but as long as if the animal dies, the
animal walking there, I say that leg. If I cut that off, it's Evim Menachai.
Yes.
Now that it died, it's mutter. So I cut the throat, so it's still living. Now it died. And
No. Now what you did was you cut a piece off while the animal was still alive, and that piece is separate from the animal. The pieces they're not attached to the animal anymore. When the animal dies, it's died without that piece.
It's connected the stomach.
It's like you slice his foot off, so the foot is on the side now, so that the animal dies, that foot stays also. Once it's able to the animal dying doesn't make the foot mutter. Okay, so now,
thank you.
So Rabbi Kvega says, because of this, he says, if you shecht an animal, and the animal is in the vela, the shechita doesn't go well, Rabbi Kvega says, you can't sell the kishka to goyim. He says, the Gemara says, you can't sell the name you can't give it to Fita. He says, you can't feed it to goy. He says, because if you give it to a goy, you just gave him Evim Menachai. Okay, that's what Rabbi Kvega says. The Pri Megadim also basically says like that. And this Shiloh is l'chayra very negated to us. Why? Because what I told you, we do sell something. Some shchitas sell intestines. They call it casings. Okay, casings isn't to say you use it to make kishgaret. That's what you use it for. There's some shchitas, some certain animals they sell. I hear that we only sell lamb casings, not beef. I don't know why. Whatever. So according to that, Rabbi Kvega says so you shouldn't be allowed to sell. You're not allowed to sell those pieces to goyim. That's what Creator says. Now, Chasam Sofer.
One second.
Nevela. Only Nevela. No, treif is not a problem. Of course, you don't Nevelas.
We sell the kosher ones. We sell the kosher ones. I don't know what they do with them.
When's it Nevela? Now, the Shrechet finishes.
They don't own them.
The way it's set up, the Goyim
own it.
If they only have, okay.
Right.
But I thought we sell because we don't like the lungs or something.
No, that's treif. What happens when there's a Nevela? What happens if the Shrechet? It doesn't make a difference how often. Whenever it happens, an animal is in a Nevela. After the Shechita, they check the knife, and they're not saying, there was a pigim in the knife. Okay, so it's in a Nevela. So it happens. Right, it messed up.
What percentage of bad shchitas?
Because of what? Because of the chaladish.
Yeah. Rabbi Fishbain's called just yesterday the house with sheets they end up with chaladas because they've got to take out the sheet, the hairs. Okay, so
I was also a fair number. It was not the Velas. But we don't keep it in Velas. I don't think we can.
Okay, so that's a question on the technicality. On the technicality, if it's not ours.
There's a halal man representative standing over while they're checking, and that's what makes it halal for them.
Okay, so it's good you mentioned that, Yanki, because the Chasam Sofer points out that you should realize that the liftei iver over here is a real trey iver din hara. He says because in a regular goy shchita, they'll never have casings that are iver menachai. Because they just shoot the animal in the head. In other words, they never get they don't have, there's no way for them to get casings that are Aver Menachai, except from a Jew's Nevelas. Because when their own killing of animals, they don't have Aver Menachai because they shoot it in the head. They don't slit its throat.
Right.
They shoot the head, they stun it, they bang it on its head. They do everything.
It doesn't die still.
No, but the piece wasn't cut off. It wasn't cut off.
Halal is different.
So except for halal, if you buy halal meat, you get Aver Menachai because they slit the throat. So, but otherwise, you can't. He says so. It's kamamish a trade within hara because it's not possible for them to get it except for this way. It's an absence. The truth is, the Chasam Sofer says. He doesn't bring Rabbi Kiva, but he's talking about that child. He says, you should just know, I'm going to be miyasha for you the minute that everyone's makel. Okay? So he has a little line up there. He says that the minute is that no one cares about this. People shaft animals, and when it's available, they sell it. Yeah? He says he wants to be miyasha the minute. He says afterwards, he says it's an example of Chadash Asur Terror, and everyone's doing it, so it's mutter, and I'll tell you why, I'll explain to you why. So the first thing he says is,
the better not the whole behemoth as is.
I'm coming to that. But some Sofer says like this. He says, when you shaft an animal, he says, and we decide the animal's in a veil, he says, really it's not in a veil. It's always a suffix in a veil. He says, we don't know that it's in a veil. Let's say there was a pigim in the knife. There's a beam in the knife. So we're concerned that there was an ikor. We're concerned that we yanked the throat out rather than slitting the throat. Okay? We don't know that that's what happened. We're just choshish that what's happened. It's a possibility. Maybe it did happen. Maybe it didn't happen. Because the knife has a pigima to it, so it could be caught onto the throat instead of slicing the throat. He says, okay, so why do we ask the animal? Because the animal has a cheskes issa to it. So he has cheskes issa. So he says, but for a guy, he has all kinds of rights. It's not for us now. He has all kinds of reasons to explain why the guy does not have an issa. So he says, so we have a cheskes issa, so we have to asur something neveil. He says, every neveil we have is, he says one case. He has not like a case where it could be not like that, but come on, every case he says is only a something neveil. He says, and so for us, something neveil is asur. For them, Safta Nevela is mutter. He says, so Mamela, he says, it's not a problem. We're not selling them Eber Lachai, because for them it's only Safta Nevela.
It's interesting. Rashi sheet is in the Chazak it's an Eber Menachai.
He talks all about that.
Right.
If you want to see the truth, he talks all about that. Okay, but you have
it's still something that's
not no, but for the guy has a cheskes heter. The guy's mutter. He has his chazaka that the animal is kosher. Now,
why is
you have to assume this. That maybe it's also for the ear.
So what you're trying, what I hope you're trying to say is, what you're trying to look at the truth. Okay, we're running out of time.
Why is that cheskes kosher?
He said the problem with what he's saying is that I don't see how it helps that for the guy it's mutter. The guy has a cheskes heter, but the reason why the animal is mutter is only because of mihikamidi. Okay, if a guy cuts the throat off, he does real shchita. He learns how to do. He does shchita. Is the Kishka mutter usher to him. It's usher to him. It's only mutter because for me, I have a heter of shchita. My heter of shchita is now marked for a guy because he say mika midi. But if the guy does it himself, the guy learns how to do shchita, he does it himself. It's worthless. So let's say it's mutter for a guy. Let's say there's cheskas heter and the guy could be matter such a suffix. That only helps for him. That doesn't help for me. He can only be matter because the yid is able to eat it. If the yid is able to eat it, then he can eat it also. But I can't eat it because you just told me I have a chazaka. Why? I'm not allowed to eat it. So if I'm not allowed to eat it, then he's not allowed to eat it either. In theory, if I would be a guy and I have to worry about this, could it be mutter? But let him do it. It has to be mutter. As the yid has to be mutter. So I'm not trying to get the
sheet is Rabbi Kiva sheet is a machlokes of some deraisa, some silver, some deraisa lachumers, is a deraisa is a derabanan. Maybe he holds that maybe something deraisa is really lakula.
I don't think it's anything to do with it. Okay, he's whole group that he wants. Okay. All right, I'm almost done. Okay, we're going to get to okay. Now, but the reason to, I think it's what David's trying to say, which I quieted down for a second, which is what I said to you before. The Chassam Sofer himself says, from the other half of the Tshuva, the Chassam Sofer himself says that we only have an Isser of Lifnei Iver when it's presumed that the person's going to use the thing for Isser. So, if I want to feed him B'nai Miyayim, I'm not allowed to do that. If I feed him B'nai Miyayim, I'm panning in front of him, obviously he's going to eat it. But we don't sell the guy B'nai Miyayim. We sell the guy a whole animal. Okay, what's he going to do with the B'nai Miyayim? When I sell him a whole side of an animal, what's he going to do with the B'nai Miyayim from my nevela? Well, some people throw them in the garbage. Some people turn them into animal feed. Lav Dafka, is he going to turn those B'nai Miyayim into casings? Even our own shchitas, some animals go to casings, some of them don't. So when I sell him the whole animal, if I was selling him like the case of the Gemara, I'm giving him B'nai Miyayim, then we have what to talk about. It might be also to give it to him. But I'm not giving him. So you're right. If we would cut our animal apart and sell it in parts, or the Mishnah in Shvi'ah says, if the guy says specifically, the person in the Shvi'ah, the person says specifically, I want to buy it for Isser, I'm buying this scythe because I want to cut down my whole field, then you're not allowed to sell it to him, because then it's with the Iver. But if the person doesn't say, if I sell him the whole animal, he didn't tell me, you can make good kishke out of that stuff. He didn't say that, so then, maybe he's going to use it for Isser, maybe he's going to use it for Hector. So then I don't have a problem with the Iver. He might not be allowed to eat it. It might be true that he's not allowed to eat it, but my selling it to him doesn't have Lifnei Iver because the Chasam Sofer said, which was, there's possible he's going to use it for Isser for Heter, so it's okay, so I can sell it to him, let him use it for what he wants to do with it.
Might you be able to say that even with the B'nai Miyayim outright? Do we have B'nai Miyayim ever used like for animal food or something?
Well, what I mean, the use of animal food is that the leftovers, the garbage at the end of the animal gets into animal food. In other words, he might not use that part. What is he going to do with the toenail? I don't know if cats have toenails. What is he going to do with the toenails? He throws the garbage. So it's when I'm selling a whole animal, is he going to use those parts for eating? He might use them for nothing. He might just, throw them out. He might not make anything. Like Chassidus says, maybe he's taking the eggs to be hatched. No, by eggs it wasn't a hector for us because we don't use eggs in the ways he has. But in the B'nai Miyayim,
what are B'nai Miyayim used for? Are they in fact used?
So in our
I'm saying nowadays, so B'nai Miyayim used for like animal food.
Well, when I say
the waste.
No, when I say animal food, I mean is all the garbage left over. They don't promise put in the garbage. They make turned animal food. It's just leftovers. The things that are not sellable.
I'm saying, but the B'nai Miyayim is if you have good B'nai Miyayim, then you can't really assume there's a possibility that they're going to use it all the time.
So you have to know what the business is. I don't know enough about. I know from our own sheet. Yes, they said that for certain animals they use them, and for certain animals they don't use them. It depends on whatever it depends on. I don't know what depends on. So when I sell a whole animal to a guy, does everybody use it? Is that what? I guess you have to know the business.
I'm saying if we find out from the business that nowadays the entire B'nai Miyayim samples are just used for animal food, so that can redefine the Lifnei Iver.
Right. I'm not even saying they have to all be. As long as that's possible.
As long as it's a possibility.
If we find the opposite, if we find that, from where everybody takes it and sells it.
Some would say the Gemara didn't contemplate such a possibility because the Gemara just said, you can't be Melchah B'nai Miyayim.
No, he actually talks about it. He actually himself talks about it. He brings Rayas and Gemara that there might not be an issue to sell B'nai Miyayim. He might not be, nobody eats B'nai Miyayim, or at least there's a possibility that Barnash, people don't eat those things. So as long as we have a possibility that he's not going to use it, so we only have to know is if it's true that everyone takes the lamb intestines and turns them into B'nai Miyayim, let's say, turns them into casings, then we'd have a problem. But if it's something that some people use and some people don't, then we have a way to get off them.